You're scared, confused, unsure. The one you've spent a huge portion of your adult life following. It's facing execution, capital punishment. And you know, they're going to try to justify it with all types of excuses. They'll say he's a dangerous radical, that he's a threat to government, a threat to peace, a threat to religion itself, and deep down, even though you know there are morsels of truth in those excuses, that the real reason they're doing this is because they're scared. They're scared of him. They're scared of his power to inspire. They're scared of how he inspired you to inspire others. But now, here, you're backed into a corner. You're not feeling inspired. You're not feeling inspiring. The fire flickers, the flames dance, and they ask the question, do you know him? You say no. They ask a second question, a little more insistent. You deny it again. And the third time now, and you say no. 3 times. 3 denials. 3 moments where you had the opportunity to inspire others, but fear overtook faith. Safety overtook truth. You don't know what to do anymore. You're lost, and you're not sure of who you are. Time begins to pass. And eventually, the one you followed, the one you thought was gone, does exactly what he said he would do. That Messiah rises from the dead. You saw the empty tomb. You saw him there in front of you, and you're pretty sure that you believed he would do it all along, even if you didn't fully understand what he meant. And now he comes to you, not with anger, not with punishment, but restoration. He meets you by the sea. He offers you a simple breakfast, and he asks, do you love me? And you say yes. He tells you to feed his sheep. He asks again, do you love me? You confirm, and he says, tend my sheep. A third time, mirroring your 3 denials, he asks, do you love me? And you say, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. He says, feed my sheep. 3 denials, 3 restorations. And he's telling you, you're not disqualified. You still have a purpose. And suddenly everything makes sense. The fog in your heart lifts. You finally have clarity. What is broken is made whole. What felt like a failure is turning into a purpose. You feel close to God again. You understand your calling. You're not stuck in the past. And you're called to move forward, and you know it. But he keeps speaking. And he tells you that following him will come with a cost. And you understand what he's saying. He's telling you that your journey of following him will end in sacrifice. It'll end in death. And then he says the words that you first heard so many years ago, but this time you understand what they mean. He says, follow me. And this time you're ready. You're not hesitant. There's no more fear of death, no more confusion. You have this clarity, this purpose. You understand what it means to lead, to serve, and even to suffer. And you decide to follow him, but then you look around and you see somebody else and you get distracted. Isn't that what we do? We finally reach that moment of clarity. We finally feel like we have our purpose. We finally understand what God is calling us to do. And then we look around and we see someone else and we see their success and their marriage looks easier and their evangelism is bringing greater results. They're just so much better than I am. And their faith looks stronger. I wish I could have the relationship that they have. I wish I could volunteer in the ways they do. I wish I could be like someone else. And instead of walking confidently, you start to ask the questions, why them? What about me? Or even, what about them? I'll tell you a quick story. There was a runner winning a race. He was in the lead. He is just before the finish line, and he hears the crowd begin to cheer, and he starts to turn around to see who's behind him. And he loses momentum, and the other runner passes him and wins the race. Somebody asks him, why did you look back? He says, I was wondering how close he was, and I guess I forgot to finish my race. That's Peter in John chapter 21. If you're here this morning, Terry did the majority of this passage in John 21, but I want to pick up where he left off in verse 20, where we see Peter distracted. Because I think what Peter does here is the same thing we do. We're forgiven, we're called, we're commissioned, and then we're distracted by comparison. Start off in John chapter 21, verse 20. This is right after Jesus had given him this confirmation. 3 calls to follow him, to care for his flock. And then in verse 20, Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also had leaned back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that is going to betray you? Peter just had this extremely personal moment of grace. Jesus just handed back Peter his purpose. But before the dust could even settle, Peter is looking at John. Translation I use is that Peter turned. And it's such a simple phrase, but it's not just the glance, it's symbolic. It's his heart drifting. And we see this relationship that Peter has with John. And John even recognizes it here in the book that he is writing, that he is the disciple whom Jesus loved. He is the disciple who leaned against him during this Last Supper. He is the disciple who asked the question, who is going to betray you? And that person was Peter. So maybe Peter was feeling a little insecure. That how can he be having this moment here with Jesus when there's someone like John right behind him? I think we do this too, no matter how powerful our moments are. After a recommitment or a confession or a prayer, we look sideways eventually. We lose focus. And Peter here could be wondering all sorts of questions. Maybe he's asking, why does John always seem so close? Why does John get it right? Or maybe he's asking the question, is John's path going to be easier? In Galatians chapter 6, verse 4, we're told, let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone, not in his neighbor. This passage comes in the broader context of Paul's instruction to the Galatian believers about bearing one another's burden and by living in the Spirit. In the first 5 verses, Paul reminds them to restore others gently, to carry their own load, and to avoid thinking of themselves more highly than they should. It's not about pride, but personal accountability. It's about rejoicing and walking in obedience, not in surpassing others. It's about not being distracted by where other people are in their walk, whether they are ahead of you or behind you. That we're to measure progress by obedience, not applause. Continue in verse 21. And when Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about this man? Here, Peter verbalizes his distraction. He's not content with following Jesus into difficulty. He wants to know, is John going to suffer too? I understand that I'm going to suffer. I understand that my faithfulness is going to cause me to die a martyr. But what about John? Is John's going to face the same costs? Is his journey going to look like mine? Peter isn't asking a question of faith. He's asking a question of fairness. He's asking, well, it's not fair if I have to suffer and John doesn't. What about him? Peter just heard the cost of following Jesus, and instead of saying, yes, Lord, instead of accepting this reconfirmation, this repurpose in his life, he asks about someone else. And this isn't the first time the disciples worried about rank or worried about each other. Earlier, they argued about who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom, and Peter asks the same old question, how do I compare? And we do that. We ask, how do I compare? And that is not a question that comes from faith. It's a question that comes from pain. It's a question of saying, I understand that I'm going to hurt, but what about them? What about John? In 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 18, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them, as he chose. If we were all a single member, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, yet one body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Paul is teaching the Corinthian church about unity in diversity, and I think this speaks directly to Peter's question. Will John's path be different? Yes, John's path will be different, but that's not a problem. That's by design. Not everyone is going to preach. Not everybody is going to lead singing. Not everybody is going to suffer in the same ways. But everybody has a part. And obedience is just as important in the nursery as it is in the Bible classroom, as it is in the mission field, as it is in the pulpit, as it is being an example to our neighbors. It's just as important, no matter how different it looks. And in verse 22, we get Jesus' answer. Jesus said to him, if it is my will that he remains until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Jesus isn't indulging Peter's comparison. He isn't accepting of Jesus' insecurity. He cuts right through it. He gives Peter a personal and powerful redirect. What is that to you? Jesus isn't dismissing John. He is refocusing Peter, right? He says, what is that to you? You follow me. Your path is yours. I'm not calling you, Peter, to be John. I'm not saying you need to be more like John. I am saying that you need to be a faithful version of yourself because you follow me. How often do we need that redirect? How often do I need that redirect where I look around and I look at people and I see their faith and I think if I could only just be a little bit more like them? I need to hear those words. What is that to me? I follow Jesus. I am not called to be a Peter or a John. I am not called to be another member of the body. I am not called to be anybody except for an obedient and faithful version of myself. We answer to Christ, not to one another. Peter wanted to know if John's walk was going to be anything like his, and Jesus said, that is not your business. Who are you to ask that question that does not concern you? And then we get to verse 23. So the saying spread among the brothers that this disciple was not to die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he was not to die, but if it is my will that he remain until I come, what is that to you? Everybody gets caught up on the wrong details. Jesus said, if it is my will that he remain until I come. Jesus says, I can do whatever I want. I could make John live for all eternity for what it matters because it doesn't matter to you. But the thing is, when we compare and we speculate and we focus on others, the truth gets lost. When we focus on other people more than our own faithfulness, we spread rumors more than we do the good news. Right? When we are more concerned with how somebody else's journey is going, when we are more concerned what their faith looks like, we become gossipers rather than gospel spreaders. In Proverbs chapter 4, verse 25, it says, let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path at your feet. Then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. It's a proverb. It's a father's wise counsel to his son, and the theme is focus, discipline, and direction. Eyes forward, feet steady, paths clear. Peter's eyes weren't going forward. He looked backwards. He turned backwards. He was no longer concerned with where he was going. He swerved. He turned his gaze to John and almost missed his own assignment. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 10 through 12, we're told, but we urge you, brothers, to do this more and more, and to aspire to live quietly, and to mind your own affairs, and to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. And Paul here is writing to the Thessalonian church about love and holiness and what it looks like to live as a faithful, obedient Christian in a world that is broken. And his advice is live quietly, mind your own affairs, work with your hands. This is radical. This was radical to their culture, and this is radical to our culture, where we're obsessed with platform and visibility and noise. And Peter had a moment where he couldn't mind his own affairs. And from that moment came speculation, confusion, and distraction. As we're told, so the saying spread. Instead of talking about the fact that Jesus was resurrected, people were talking about the fact that maybe John's not going to die. Instead of talking about the good news, about the saving grace that God offers, they were concerned with gossip because Peter got distracted. So tonight I have a simple question. Are you following Jesus? Or are you too busy looking at others? Peter had been forgiven. Peter had been called. He had been re-given his commission. And even after that, he couldn't help but ask, what about him? And Jesus answered with the only words that really matter. What is that to you? You follow me. And that's still his answer today. When we're tempted to compare, when we wonder why someone else's road looks easier, when we think that God is doing more for or with someone else than he is with ourselves, we need to remember, I am not called to be them. I am called to be faithful. So if you're here tonight, well, first things first, if you're here tonight and you haven't accepted this call, if you have not yet put on Christ through baptism, if you've not yet been forgiven of your sins, if you've not yet accepted this great good news that they should have been talking about, and the question is, why wait? This isn't an invitation for that. But if you're a Christian who has made mistakes, who has gotten distracted, who has gotten caught up with, well, what about them? And you have focused so much on other people that you forget to focus on what it means to be obedient. And this is an invitation for you too. And whatever that means, I ask that you take that next step. If you need the prayers of the congregation, if you need to come forward, if you need to talk to somebody, then this is that time. But if you need to go home tonight, and you need to pray, and you need to read your Bible, and you need to have a serious conversation with both yourself and your God, then I ask that you do that. Because comparing ourselves to one another doesn't do us any good. It just breeds confusion. So if the body here can help you in any way tonight, I ask that you come forward as we stand and sing together.